Well, hello and welcome to episode 2 of your almost weekly Progcast. I'm Ben.
And I'm Aled.
Aled is the coolest guy I know.
Right, which back catalogue did you get that from?
Don't say I never do anything for you, man. You've got
You
your
recorded me my own special tune.
You've got your own little Progcast jingle now.
That's a little bit sinister almost.
Yeah, actually it started off as a 15-minute epic about your life, but that was all that was left after I deleted the synth solos, the rap section, and the odd part about the wizard.
Well, gradually we can drip that in through the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned.
Okay, so this week we'll be looking at the second album from prog rock veterans Gentle Giant, entitled Acquiring the Taste. But will it be sweet or sour? Ham or spam? Black sheep or Asda Basics bitter? Which I hasten to add I've never drank.
Oh, you lie.
Have you had any of that?
Well, no, I've had Sainsbury's Basics bitter. I assume that's a similar beast.
Yeah, well at 2% it's probably as weak as Point of Entry by Judas Priest. Oh!
That's not the opposite of progressive music, but keep it in, alright.
Okay, so perhaps you just want to start. This is an album that I've shown to Ali, hadn't heard before.
No.
Perhaps you just want to start with some of your first impressions of it.
First impressions is got to be the album cover, which, is it me? It's a massive tongue. I mean, presumably we're going to put a picture on, but it looks like someone about to devour an asshole. It really does.
That is exactly what I saw. I was thinking, do I have a dirty mind?
I know, yeah.
Suggest
I was
that?
questioning myself. I was thinking, what else could it be?
It's puckering up for some...
It is actually a juicy peach once you
Yeah,
the cover.
it's an apple and a peach.
But that's hardly a kind of disguised metaphor, is it? So acquiring the taste might be a bit of a sinister name for the album anyway.
I can only presume that was intended.
I think so, yeah, probably.
It's not really proggy, is it? It's just sort of weird.
Makes me want to delve in and explore more.
Okay, anyway, what did you think about the sound, Aled?
The sound, I think it's got a kind of it's almost got quite rocky mixed with jazz elements, really, I guess.
Yeah.
It's kind of what came to mind was Uriah Heep in the more rockier and with the kind of operatic vocals almost.
Definitely, yeah.
But then mixed with little bits of, you can't even call it jazz, it was just kind of jazzy sounds.
That's very much it. It's got jazz influences and some jazz instruments. Now, when I first heard it, I thought this is, it's unique. I've not really heard, there's some Uriah Heep comparison, but I've not really heard anything that sounds quite like that before. And it's very progressive, and there's some very, very brave ideas in there, aren't there?
I disagree a bit. I think there are quite a lot of, the Soft Machine comes to mind with a lot of weird kind of almost avant-garde soundscapes rather than...
Yeah.
But it is a bit more musical than that.
Yeah. But it's quite an English sound in a sense, because it's got a lot of instruments that are very twee. So you've got some flute melodies in there that I noticed. On the first song, Pentagruel's Nativity, you've got kind of jazzy trumpets and stuff like that. And it's just a very strange mix, isn't it, with guitar and sort of flute and things over the top.
Yeah, not wrong with that.
Yeah, did you think it was pleasant to listen to?
Yes, yeah, generally.
Good.
Can I read the liner notes bit, what it says?
Oh, please do.
Inside. It's getting a bit nerdy, isn't it? Oh, please do. Wait, what does it say? It is our goal to expand the frontiers of contemporary popular music at the risk of being very unpopular.
Yeah.
We have recorded each composition with one thought, and then listed 3 thoughts. It should be unique, adventurous, and fascinating. And they want to abandon all preconceived thoughts on blatant commercialism.
Yeah, okay, well that's kind of does sum up the sound of this album. I would say there's a lot of sort of intellectually interesting parts to it, but not all the parts for me are particularly pleasant to listen to. For example, there's some very, very strange, haunting harmonies at times, especially on Pentagruel's, the first track. But there's loads of weird, haunting, creepy sounds. The Edge of Twilight, it sounds very just strange. It's not necessarily good, it's just strange.
I don't think that's really a tune. I don't think you could really count that as a tune, to be honest.
That's not a good start.
Not in a good way either.
No.
Like, sometimes you think, wow, that sounds crazy, and like quite often I'll explore prog albums that are like described as that. As this doesn't fit into musical convention, and it's kind of exciting and intriguing, but when you actually listen to it, you just think, what the bloody hell was that?
Some of it sounds like it wouldn't be out of place on a sort of badly acted 70s horror movie, those sort of eerie sections in this quiet street. But speaking of sort of TV analogy, I think the title track, Acquiring the Taste, the sort of jaunty jazz instrumental thing, again, it wouldn't be out of place on TV. You know, perhaps one of those creepy 70s animated shows.
Yeah, I think for me the first half of the album reminds me of Dark Side of the Moon, and I don't say that in a good way.
Yeah.
In that I think there's a lot of that album is building atmosphere, building tension probably, but it always leaves me feeling a bit empty because there's not a substantial amount of music and melodies and tunes, and I think it's the same there when you broke it up with Edge of Twilight, Acquiring the Taste, and within the kind of the real tracks, if you want, the House, the Street, and the Room, and Pentacles and Contiguity, it feels a bit empty, and I never feel satisfied like I've had 4 tracks worth after that. But I think the second half of the album, like with Dark Side of the Moon, does actually provide a lot more musicality.
Yeah, and you've picked on a couple of good ones there. So before we go into too many criticisms, I think we should talk a bit about the best parts of the album, the parts that actually sound good, because there are great bits in there. You mentioned The House, the Street, the Room. I think that song and the other kind of rocky one, Wreck, really, really intelligent prog songs, but they've got that kind of rockiness to them. You know, they've got kind of quite heavy riffs, almost Sabbath-esque riffs.
They're the two most rocky.
Yeah, and I think that they do those rockier bits a lot. Well, they're more entertaining to me than these strange, odd, very experimental harmonic sections. You know, but those songs are in really odd time signatures, both of them. And very, very quirky ideas. One's about like a shipwreck or something, isn't it? And, you know, they work well on those. I mean, did you like those tracks as well?
I think on my first listen, those 2 tracks were the standouts for me. But I was finding by about my 5th listen that especially the Wreck aged so quickly.
Yeah, because it's quite repetitive, isn't it?
And that's my main problem with the album. I don't want to be too down on it because my overall impression was a negative.
Yeah.
But when they say that they want to go for non-commercialism, it's like, what is that? That's like saying like your religion is atheism, or my hobby is not collecting Pokemon cards. It's not an aim in itself. As you've already mentioned, a lot of the non-commercial aspects. But the one thing that they kept that was commercial was the repetitive overuse of hooks. Because those 2 songs have really great kind of guitar hooks.
That's right,
but it's just absolutely milked out. So I find myself totally bored of listening to it. It's like instead of having a sandwich, eating half a loaf of bread, and then eating half a tin of Spam, and then half a block of cheese and an onion. It's like why don't you just mix
you've done that before the pub, I know.
This is a man talking from experience.
I've never seen you look iller than when you did that whole block of cheese meal.
Exactly, it doesn't work.
You've got none of the nice filling middle bits, and again we'll come back to that because I think there's a bit to compare with last week as well on that point. But yeah, I agree. They've not got that middle ground.
I think the one where they actually got it right was The Moon Is Down. I think that just hit it nicely. And it was just a really more refined. It felt a little bit more mature, whereas it didn't initially jump out at me.
But I think we have to remember this was their second album, and I think you are still finding your feet at that point. Maybe the balance isn't quite right here.
But the worst, I mean, this was released in '71. There was a lot of prog bands by that point that had already released
better stuff.
I mean, the one that really comes to mind is The Court of the Crimson King, which
absolute album.
It's a very similar sound to my ears, but doesn't have that failings. And that was released in '69, was it?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's been done better already. I think.
Fine. I think one thing that I've listened to prog for and that I really enjoy in prog is drumming. And you know, if you think about the big prog drummers, names like Portnoy, Neil Peart,
Bruford,
Phil Collins. You know, Phil Collins, phenomenal drummer. They make things come alive. They really add a lot to the song. On this album, the drums sound a bit thin. They're not present enough. I don't know if it's about cymbal or style, but
do you mean the mix, or do you mean the?
No, it's the playing and the mix. It's not just one or the other. It's both of them, and I think that that disappointed me a bit because there's a lot of crazy stuff in there. I'd expect some ripping, crazy Phil Collins fills, you know. Let's move on then, and come back to some of those criticisms that you're putting in there about it trying to be non-commercial, trying to be out of the box, and trying very hard. I think that fits in nicely to contrast with last week. We were talking about Standing England by the Pound last week, an album that has lots of very proggy ingredients, but comes across very naturally, and you kind of don't notice that that's in there. And you brought out the analogy of cricket, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
With Selling England by the Pound being like a game of cricket. I'd say this album is more like a game of chess, in that a lot of thought and effort goes into it, but you're not always certain that you're enjoying yourself.
I don't think I've ever once enjoyed myself whilst playing chess, if I'm honest.
There are all bits, aren't there, where you take someone's piece or whatever. I think that the contrast works very well. So that was an album that had very natural sounds, happened to be in prog signatures. The progressive elements didn't feel contrived. Acquiring the Taste is out there, and the ideas are sort of detrimental to listenability. It's very brave, but it goes in directions that I don't find that enjoyable, actually.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think probably the song on the album that sums that up most is Black Cat.
Yeah.
Which for me, when I first heard it, I was like, wow, it's like the Antiques Roadshow theme tune, just on acid, isn't it? And then, again, it kept going, and it kept milking it out, and it kept lingering a bit too long. I was like, by the end of it, I felt like I'd watched the whole episode of the Antiques Roadshow, you know? It's like, come on, this has gone too long now.
On the whole, would you recommend people pick up this album, have a listen, or would you say just pass it by and go on to something else?
Difficult, because there are some very good songs on there, but I just think the album overall, there is better stuff around. Like I mentioned King Crimson before, I think I'd point people towards that, really.
Yeah, and this isn't really Gentle Giant's seminal album. I mean, that's Octopus, isn't it? And probably best just to bypass this weird stuff at the start and go to that. Did you acquire the Taste?
Well, I think I already had the Taste, and I think if that was my first introduction to the Taste, then I probably wouldn't go back for more.
You might spit it out.
I think I wouldn't go back for seconds.
You go back to the Best Buy Bitter.
Okay, so last week you did me a little quiz, so I've prepared one for you. So.
I must say I went easy on you, and I hope you've done the same for me.
I don't think this isn't too niche.
All right,
in fact, it's not niche at all.
Let's have a listen. Very nice. That is Rush.
Correct.
Oh God, which one is it?
Go on, give it another.
Is it Tom Sawyer?
It is Tom Sawyer. Yes, well done. There we go.
Absolute tune as well. 1-1. Okay, guys, thank you very much for listening. This has been episode 2 of the Progcast. We've been talking about Acquiring the Taste by Gentle Giant. See you next week. I thought we were getting stuck for ideas, but we weren't.